the best of Twin Peaks Unwrapped, starring John Bernardy, Barry Gifford, John Neff, Francine the Lucid Dream, and Schaffer the Dark Lord as the Pink Room, Scott, John, Brett, Chris, and Beano as the Bookhouse Boys, Sherilyn Fenn, Josh Minton, Bob Ingalls, with special guest John Carroll Lynch, writer and co-creator Mark Frost, and the executive producer of Twin Peaks, Sabrina Sutherland. And now your host, Scott Ryan.
Hello everyone, this is DJ Scott Ryan, and you're listening to KTPU 25.3 on the old AM dial, coming to you live from White Sands, New Mexico. It's August 5th, 4:30 a.m. in the morning, right here in lovely 1956. And we've got a packed show for you this morning. I know all you kids have been sending me letters wanting to hear that song, My Prayer by the Platters. To be honest with you, I'm a little sick of it. Every time I hear it, I get this tingle up the back of my spine, as if, I could just rip my head off when I hear that song. But I promise you, we'll play it. Just hold on. We'll play it at the end. We've got a lot of great guests here. When it's this time in the morning, who you gonna have guiding you through your radio dial? Well, it's me, the Blue Rose of Radio. We're happy to have ya. And we're gonna have our first guest, John Bernardy, from the 25 Years Later webpage. Never heard of a web page before. It's 1956. I don't know these crazy kids. He's talking about his earthquake theory. I'm not sure what an earthquake theory is. I remember in 1945 I was around here, and I'm telling you, there was an earthquake. I'm not sure what they were doing out in the desert. Government says it's fine, and, we can always trust our government. Of course we can. Let's listen in on John Bernardy and his earthquake theory.
Recently on Sparkwood and 21 podcast, they read some feedback. They had their own Secret History of Twin Peaks discussion about the book, and they had some feedback from you near the end of the podcast.
There's a theory that I have for the time discrepancies that nobody else seems to be talking about yet, and I would love to be able to just put that out there for people. It's a section under earthquakes. Leaning into science for a moment, the BBC Science Hour played a segment within weeks of the Secret History's release with geologist Ross Stein, who was explaining the system of fault lines that were creating a large number of earthquakes, suddenly wreaking havoc across towns in Italy. In the specific situation Stein spoke of, he said the tectonic plate Italy called home was being compressed until about 1 million years ago. Now it's being stretched so its faults are trying to figure out how to do something different than it was born to do, and they're reorganizing. He said the lines were little broken shards of faults that haven't been organized by repeated earthquakes into a long, continuous, smooth fault. So that means if you jostle one fault line, you tend to move the others around it, and no one fault is able to rupture for a very long distance and produce a very large earthquake. So we get these little groups or families of moderate-sized events. Reread everything Stein just said, but instead of fault line, substitute with the name of someone who's had an interaction with a lodge, like Parsons or even Briggs or Cooper. And every time you hear earthquake, substitute with timequake. So every time one of us meets a lodge denizen or we reach into one another's worlds, our realities scrape against each other at a proverbial fault line, and it becomes charged. Enough meetings like that, and the line between our realities will slip, and a reality quake shakes up time. I'd have to say the original name shock in Twin Peaks, and the reason I'm so keen on this earthquake metaphor in the first place, occurred when volcanic activity, fire-based volcanic activity, in the Twin Peaks area formed Blue Pine and Whitetail Mountains. Meadow Radio's Mark Givens is fond of mentioning the Michener-style book Frost wanted to write as early as 1990 that would begin with the formation of the mountains and focus on the weird electrical energy that settled between them. So I feel good saying this was on Frost's mind the entire time he was writing Secret History.
A lot to unpack.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. Your argument is that we're not saying this is an alternate reality, and this is not like, we're not going with the idea that it's a fake dossier.
I don't think any of that could happen, because if it was an alternate history, we'd have one dossier. or it would somehow be able to travel across like so many multiple timelines, it would just get too confusing. But I figure with the way, if you look at it just like from a metaphysical geographic event, I say later on, it's kind of like, you know, if you skip a rock across a water and like you see a ripple form, it's like the events that are most important are kind of at the top of those ripples as it fans out. And all the other events like, you know, Norma's mom, things like that, they get kind of pushed or rewritten. And, you know, it's like the most important things are around the point of impact. So like wherever the character was at a main shock, such as like, oh, I don't know, Laura Palmer's murder, all those facts around it are basically set in stone. And you can kind of move things around however you feel like if you're, say, a writer who doesn't want to exclusively adhere to canon religiously, but you're the kind of person to meticulously go back and figure out exactly what kind of pieces are in this watch called Twin Peaks that you're working with. I think Frost is both like really fascinated by being able to rewrite things, but also in a way that it's not going to like counteract anything. I think the way the earthquake metaphor can work, it allows like canon inconsistencies just to kind of sit next to each other like they do in the Secret History dossier. You know, basically, think of it like the Star Wars trilogies. You know, you've got the original one that you guys and I grew up with, and then you've got the special editions. But if you take their DVDs and put them right next to each other, you can fit them all into the same dossier.
I think a great metaphor you made was the kind of like the solar system, right? That like there could be planets and everybody can kind of hang out and be in the same gravity, but
like each individual product, you know, like Laura Palmer's Diary could be like considered a planet on its own, and TV Twin Peaks can, and Secret History can, and Fire Walk with Me especially. Like that thing used to just boggle my mind so much I wouldn't even know how to talk about it, so I just didn't. Everybody thought that I wasn't, you know, that I just hated Fire Walk with Me, but it's like what everybody's doing right now with Secret History, and that it's just hard to rationalize it next to everything.
What would create this earthquake that time would almost be rewritten?
Okay, Jack Parsons, for example, you know, it's like he does all that Thelma magic in the lodge where the lumber came from Twin Peaks area and et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, it's like he's trying to summon basically a force, which I'm assuming comes from the lodge. I mean, I know the lodges are barely talked about in this book at all, but I think the whole book is like literally every single page is about our world's interaction with the lodge's world. Wow. And like the friction in between. So like you think of our world as one tectonic plate and you think of the lodge world as another tectonic plate. When Jack Parsons ripped between our worlds, that's one big, huge frictional plate slippage or whatever the actual term is. The repercussions happen from there, like Margaret and the two guys getting abducted as children. I mean, it's in the 1927 article that Andrew Packard wrote, and it's in the 1947 article that Robert Jacoby wrote. But, you know, you figure the abduction is also an interaction with the lodges. So, like, that's kind of friction between our worlds when we interact with them. So it ends up becoming a foreshock and an aftershock of the Parsons event, which also happened in 47. And Roswell ends up being an aftershock. I've got an idea that he unleashed Bob right then. I mean, not Roswell, Parsons. So, I mean, all this stuff is obviously just mostly from inference. So, I mean, I could be totally disproven, and I totally expect it. I mean, the way I think of this whole thing is I was solving for Robert Jacoby, and I found number 14 in the answer book. You know, like I think there's so many different ways that this can work, and you know, I'm just throwing it out there, just like anybody else. But I think the earthquake thing is a good metaphor that actually is true.
We will be right back after these messages.
Starting positions.
The first journey through Twin Peaks concluded 2.5 years ago. And ever since then, viewers and subscribers have been asking if I plan to cover the return. The answer is yes. Sometime in the first half of 2018, I'll debut parts 5 and 6 of Journey Through Twin Peaks. Part 5 will dwell on the build-up to the Showtime series. make a deeper exploration of both Lynch's and Frost's work, survey the fan culture that kept Twin Peaks alive for 25 years, and broaden our scope to include the contributions of collaborators who weren't included in my first series. The final chapter of Part 5 will survey the 18 hours chronologically as they unfolded week to week over the summer of 2017. Meanwhile, I have a ton of other Twin Peaks material, old and new, that you can explore, not just on my YouTube channel, but also on my site, lostinthemovies.com. I'm planning to reboot and relaunch an extensive character series, written entries analyzing each character who appears in the 50 or so hours of Twin Peaks for more than 10 minutes. There'll be 86 entries, building from the smallest to the largest role. And as I prepare the project this fall, you can also explore my Twin Peaks archives, including written analysis, visual tributes, video essays, and podcast appearances. This summer, I wrote about each episode after it aired, so you can also find coverage of Season 3, or at least my initial impressions of it. So, take this video not only as an announcement of future work, but an invitation to get lost in the movies, and of course, in Twin Peaks. See you there.
What's wrong?
Oh, I'm just really tired these days.
I know how you feel. Have you tried coffee?
Nah, this isn't the kind of tired coffee can fix.
Well, what about Sparkle?
Sparkle? What's that?
Sparkle's the new name in waking up with a charge. Available in powder or pill form, Sparkle has a real kick that keeps you going no matter what the day has in store. Based on the newest innovations in biomedical engineering from the Far East, it will give you that dose of energy you need to sparkle throughout your day.
Sparkle may have some side effects, including impaired mental judgment, rashes, hallucinations, travel to parallel dimensions, sudden intercorporeal coin appearances, ominous ethereal whooshing, occasional backward stalking, and the sense that one is beating themselves. In rare cases, users may experience zombie-like behavior, including bleeding from the mouth and other orifices. Users should refrain from operating a motor vehicle until they feel comfortable using Sparkle. Always check to ensure Sparkle won't interact with any other medication you may be taking. Not recommended for pregnant or nursing women. Check your local Sparkle distributor to ensure Sparkle is right for you. Wow, this Sparkle is really something. I almost feel like I'm going to another place altogether.
Hello, this is Michael Horse from Twin Peaks, and you're listening to Twin Peaks Unwrapped.
White Sands Radio.
So we're on the phone with Barry Gifford. What was the process for you writing Lost Highway with David Lynch?
Well, I mean, the fact is that David and I, we'd actually worked on a couple of other projects prior to that. You know, obviously there was Hotel Room, and obviously there was my consultation with Wild at Heart, and then, you know, they had approached me, he and producers had approached me about, you know, writing other material, you know, as feature film, and we did a couple of things, but they, you know, didn't get done, or for one reason or another.
Yeah.
In any event, then David came to me and he said, I haven't made a movie in 4.5 years and I want you to write it with me. And that's what happened. We just began. He had optioned my book Night People and had that for about a year, and he really wanted to make a movie out of that. And I said, you know, well, you know, we're a couple of people who are capable of having halfway of an original thought. So why don't we just do something original and not have to be tied to a text that, you know, that already exists, right? So he said, oh, but I really like these couple of lines from the book and this and that. And so I said, well, let's take them. Let's use those lines, which we did, and which included the title. And, you know, where one of the women says to the other, we're just a couple of Apaches, you know, riding wild on the Lost Highway. And toward the end, which eventually went into the voice of Mr. Eddie saying, you know, you and me, mister, we can really out ugly them some bitches, can't we? Yeah. And so the thing is, those lines, you know, found themselves in the movie in an important way. And so that's what we did. We just created something new under the sun. And one interesting thing about it is that it has been and still is the subject of classes in universities. You know, from, I mean, I've been asked to speak at various times at basically at film schools like in Rome and at Stanford just last year. You know, they have a whole class. And in fact, my youngest son took a class in Lost Highway at UC San Diego years ago.
Wow.
You know, which was taught by a French professor who didn't know that my son was in the class, actually.
Wow, that's funny.
He got an A. And later, when he found out, he came to my son and asked him if he could show this paper that he'd written about it to me and to David or to Meadow or something, which, you know, that didn't happen. But in any event, we weren't interested in that sort of thing. But in any case, that movie has, you know, maintained itself in, I think, a very important and interesting way, and certainly has a great following that amazed me. David always repeats the story that a unit publicist came up with this, and I think it did happen almost simultaneously, in fact. But what happened was we'd written the first draft of the screenplay, and then I had to take a couple of weeks out because I had to go to Spain and elsewhere to do promotion for a book or a couple of books. And when I was on the plane, I happened to sit next to this woman who was a psychiatrist, and she was teaching at Stanford at the time. And she was a Swiss woman. Her name was Manuela Kogan. She really was unfamiliar with my work or with David Lynch's work. She didn't watch TV. She didn't go to movies. She didn't read novels. She'd asked me what I did, and, you know, we just had this conversation. We were flying from San Francisco to New York, and where I was going to catch a plane to Barcelona. I described this to her, you know, what we were dealing with the plot of, you know, of what became Lost Highway. And I said, do you think this is feasible? Does this make sense to you in some way? And she said, oh, yes, what you're describing is a psychogenic fugue, a fugue state where somebody, you know, is overwhelmed by a particular problem and develops this condition where they can only escape but within their own mind. So at the airport at JFK, I called Lynch, told him what happened, and that this woman had come up with, you know, this analysis. And I know this really did happen. Now, it could be that the unit publicist at some point in there also came up with this. I'm not sure of the nature of that event, but in any event, that's what I know happened with me and my then repeating it to Lynch. And in fact, we invited this woman, psychiatrist, professor from Stanford at the time. I think she's back in Switzerland long since. We invited her to the premiere.
That's great.
That's awesome.
And she came.
Wow.
That is something.
She was great, Manuela Kogan, and she said this was, you know, she got a huge kick out of it. It was a great thrill for her, and she was a delightful and brilliant woman, and that really did happen.
What influenced you?
What influenced me? That's a good question. I think it was really organic. It was an organic situation, and I know this is an abused and overworked term these days, organic, but it did just grow in this sense because the screenplay really went through a number of changes in the sense that in the beginning, in fact, it was quite comedic. And so we didn't really know where we were going to end up with it. But it took its own form. I mean, David had the story that he had in his mind for some time about someone receiving videotapes of their life, and they didn't know who was doing the videotapes like that. And so that was there, but that was rather vague, but interesting. Of course, we adopted that and integrated it into the film. We had a lot of ideas. You know, there were a lot of things. But, you know, I'll tell you something. Write something, it's based on the characters. It's really, I let the characters take over. The characters have lives of their own, and I let them go through the paces, you know, and we follow them on their story. I don't start with ideas. I never do. I mean, it's not like, I mean, there's no rules in any of this.
That was Barry Gifford, the co-writer of Lost Highway and author of Wild at Heart. And this is the Blue Rose of Radio, Scott Ryan, and you're listening to KTPU 25.3 White Sands Radio. I'm not sure what it's looking like out there. It's pretty dark, and I for a second there, I thought I saw Abe Lincoln, and then I'm like, what am I, crazy? Eisenhower's president. I don't know what's wrong with me. I maybe need some coffee. That fixes everything, I hear. Our next segment is with musician extraordinaire John Neff, who was in the studio, and he talked about Blue Bob. Blue Bob? I guess that's okay. It would just be green that Bob really is afraid of. I mean, I'm telling you, you get a glove, you put some green on it, that'll kill any demons that are there. Not that there's any demons hanging around here. I think I'm pretty safe in a radio station in White Sands, New Mexico. What could possibly happen? I actually heard some rumors that John Neff is going to produce Elvis Presley's next album, so that should be something. We'll see if he talks about that, or if he just stays on the Blue Bob conversation.
It's funny, David and I both played music on Jocelyn Montgomery's album, Lux Vivens, which came out in 1998. And Dave played guitar on that for the first time, and he used it, he laid it on his lap, and he'd bang on the guitar. I'd put it in a certain detuning so that both strings formed a chord, and he would bang on it and then use the vibrato bar, tune it way down, and make special effects with it. He enjoyed that so much that we got him a couple of guitars. He had borrowed one for that record. We got him a couple of guitars, and he wanted to keep experimenting. When the album was done, he was sad. He said, I want to keep experimenting in music. And that's what these all were. They were experiments to him. He wanted to make drum tracks out of machine noises. So, for instance, on Pink Mountain Range, on the Blue Bob album, there's a 80-ton metal press that is the kick drum, 8,000-volt Spark is the snare drum, a printing press is the hi-hat. Wow. And I would make these drum patterns and loop them. And then David and I would play live to them, and then he'd hand me lyrics out of a box, an old shoebox full of typewritten pages, poems that he wrote 25 years ago. And he would hand me a poem and say, this is the lyrics for this song.
Wow.
And the first time he did it, I thought, well, I'll go home and work on a melody for this thing at night and then come back the next day and sing the song. And he says, no, right now. I don't want you to think about it. I want you to just go in and do it.
Wow.
And so on, I think, 3 or 4 of the songs, he handed me his director's megaphone and wanted me to sing into a $10,000 mic with this megaphone to give it like a sound of a small speaker in a box. And then he'd feed me delays in my headphones so that I'd stutter. And it was really quite an experiment. I sat beside him for over 8 years, almost 9 years. And he likes to talk. So we'd tell stories a lot during the course of working. And of course, he takes a lot of smoke breaks. So we'd talk during his smoke breaks. One day he turned around to me and he says, we know more about each other than our wives do. The song is called No Stars, and it originally started life as a Blue Bob song that gave birth to this song. We had done a song in Mulholland Drive called Pretty 50s, which was a light and airy kind of whimsical set of chords that evoked the 50s. Right after that, I got an idea for a heavy 50s song. It was real dark. And so I wrote the chords to this thing and played it on the guitar orchestra, and David really liked it. And we didn't know what we were going to do with it, but we decided to develop it. David was inspired to write some words for it and thought that it might be ideal for Rebecca. Rebecca came over, and David gave her the words, and she started singing a melody immediately to it that we really liked. She took some of the English words and turned them into Spanish and incorporated it as a bilingual song. And then she wanted this whole dreamy ending. So I had to change the ending chorus to just go back and forth and be No Stars all the way out. And we recorded it the next day.
Wow.
It was really amazing.
That's something.
And I put the drums down, and then Dave and I both played electric guitar on it, and I played the guitar orchestra on it. Dave did the lyrics himself. I wrote the music, and Rebecca wrote the vocal melody and the Spanish lyrics. It's an album called Love Hurts, Love Heals, and it was released in November of 2011. And I mastered the album for her. It's a really nice record. We put No Stars on it, and I remastered No Stars for that album. So it sounds a little different than it does on the TV show, because the TV show is an unmastered version. So it's definitely worth looking into, because it's quite the experience. The money was minimal, but I'm just happy to see the song come to life.
John, I know the answer, but we see Moby with a guitar in the show. Moby didn't have anything to do with this, right?
He had absolutely nothing to do with it. It was just a TV band.
You've been watching it. What did you think of the new series, John?
When I saw the cast list announced, it came to my mind that what David was doing was making a magnum opus, or his grand unified field, of all of his work. And I do believe that that's what the series is becoming. It's definitely his magnum opus. It's an 18-hour movie.
Yeah.
It's just stunning.
We will be right back after these messages.
The Blue Rose magazine is a lively, full-color publication that offers discussion, debate, news, and analysis about Twin Peaks, David Lynch and Mark Frost's fascinating series, old and new. Every 4 months, the Blue Rose will examine Showtime's new season of Twin Peaks. It will also cover the original classic episodes and the feature film, Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. Expect essays that delve deep into Twin Peaks, interviews with cast and crew, reports on current Twin Peaks events, and a regular column about the music of Angelo Badalamenti. Join co-editors Scott Ryan and John Thorne as they guide you through this singular, unforgettable work. Issue 1 presents an in-depth review of Mark Frost's new book, The Secret History of Twin Peaks, a report on the UK Twin Peaks Festival, an interview with screenwriter Robert Engels, an informative glimpse at the remastering of the Fire Walk With Me soundtrack, a heartfelt tribute to Catherine Coulson, the Log Lady, and much more.
Hey, this is Charlotte Stewart, and you're listening to Twin Peaks Unwrapped.
White Sands Radio.
We're on the phone with Francine, the Lucid Dream, and Schaffer, the Dark Lord.
I had gone and seen a Pink Room show as a civilian, and afterward, I basically threw myself at Francine and said, I just want to host this. I love Twin Peaks so much. I love David Lynch so much. I'll do anything. I'll write a song for it. I'll dress up. Yeah, I was really, really trying to come bearing gifts to kind of prove myself in the show. So I wrote that song for the first time that I hosted, and now I perform it every time we do the show. And then Francine made a movie around it.
I mean, that song is such a gift because it's very rare that you can find a host who, is talented as Schaffer, but also can write and perform his own music, and then to create a song that is so specifically tailored to our show was amazing. So basically he wrote that song and then he was hired for every single show ever since.
I guess I'm always left with guesses. None of the people that I meet can seem to answer questions. There are very long pauses in the dialogue and I spy a very pretty girl. I'm pretty sure she's gonna die. It's like it's nighttime all the time. Get in the car. My life's a David Lynch movie, which I'm the star.
Mission accomplished.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Special Agent Dale Bartholomew Cooper.
Honestly, there were so many great acts that night, and one of them for me was that I really liked was Legs Malone, who did the Cooper and her fixation with the donut. I thought it was wonderful. I thought she was really into character, and really it was a fun piece. Each one of these performers make their own act, or how does this come about, Francine?
Yes, no, burlesque is one of those unique performance arts where, yes, there's a certain amount of casting involved because we want to bring a lot of variety to the show, but everyone puts together their own acts. Everyone, for the most part, makes their own costumes and choreographs their own thing and, sometimes edits their own music together. It's a very do-it-yourself sort of art form. Of course, we help each other too. Some people, are better at costumes or better at choreography or whatnot. But no, this is the thing that is so beautiful about burlesque, and I think in particular David Lynch burlesque, is that all these wacky weirdos have come up with the crazy ideas they put on stage themselves.
That is
obviously
awesome.
With the help of an inspiration of David Lynch.
The cast that Francine has booked over the years, you wouldn't know how few people are in the core cast of the show because so many of them have a half dozen David Lynch characters and they're all total shapeshifters. It's this whole universe is represented in a dozen to 20 performers.
I think that's the fun thing about doing David Lynch, or like specifically Twin Peaks burlesque, is that there's so many different characters and so many different themes, and you can have an entire show. And I mean, we did that huge show that you saw, and that was still just a tiny selection of all the acts that we've had in the show over the years. You know, there are some really funny ones that, you know, we couldn't even fit into the show. There's some like really dark ones too we didn't get to fit in the show, unfortunately.
The amount of time it took to change costumes weren't an issue. I feel like Francine could book a 2-hour Pink Room show of just her act.
Wow.
Wow. Do you have a count of...
I counted this. I recently tweeted this. I came up, and this is not including like the different versions I've done, you know, because I've done different versions with like live bands and stuff like that. But just the basic acts that I've done just for Twin Peaks burlesque is at least 10. So that's a full show. I could do. Yeah. I like started counting all the David Lynch burlesque acts that I have. It's got to be over 20 at this point in my life.
Wow. That's crazy.
And Francine, the highlight for me was you singing the Sycamore Trees.
Ah, what a treat I heard.
When she performs that number, that's always a show highlight for me too. I've always loved that song. I mean, ever since the finale in '92, I've loved that song, and I've never gotten to see it performed live by anybody. It's always a treat when I get to do that number. Listen, Francine, I don't know if I've ever told you that, but I love saying that number so much.
I didn't know that. Thank you so much. That means the world to me, because to be totally frank with you and all your listeners, doing slow singing acts are probably the one thing that terrifies me the most. It was my first Twin Peaks burlesque act. It's my first David Lynch burlesque act. It's the first act of the Pink Room burlesque when we first started doing this show. And I took a chance on it because I love Jimmy Scott's version of it. I actually got to meet Jimmy Scott when he came to do a very intimate show at Duane Park a number of years ago. Since I got to meet him before he sadly passed away. That song is just so haunting and beautiful, and I just try to do my best with it because I admire Jimmy Scott and his version of it so much. That means a lot to me, so thank you very much, and I'm glad you got to see it.
Now it's after midnight and it's April 1st. Don't trust anything. Less of all your creepy fucking friends. But I'd also like to send a shout out. We've got a couple of friends of the show who are celebrating birthdays tonight. First of all, Ben from Twin Peaks Unwrapped podcast. Happy birthday, brother. I'd also like to send a shout out to photographer Liz Vellick.
It made me very happy that both of you were there at midnight and you both had birthdays and you're both two of the biggest Twin Peaks fans I know.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
That's very cool.
awesome.
It's very special. I had a really good time. I was gleeful. I was very happy. I think this is probably the best birthday I've ever had. You can't beat
that, man. That is awesome.
You guys really put on a great show. It really is. I would recommend to anybody to go see the Pink Room.
That, you know, and that also means a lot because obviously you are super fans of the world of Twin Peaks. You know, you've also hung on to your fandom for 25 years. You have committed time and energy in your art, continuing to keep it alive. When fans like you have this amazing time at the show, it means like, oh, well then all of those little details and those little deep cut references, they all landed on the absolute intended audience. And
sure
that
did.
Fandom at times can be kind of a tricky thing where it's so passionate, but it can also be so very unforgiving in a way that like unforgiving quality seems to embolden one's fandom. Oh, they missed this one detail. That key prop was in the wrong shape because it makes you feel like you're more into it. So when people who are like really passionate fans come and then go on and then say things in front of an audience like it was best birthday ever, well, then it feels like all these weirdos did a really good job.
That was Schaffer the Dark Lord and Francine the Lucid Dream from the Twin Peaks Burlesque. I love burlesque. I saw Jolson do some burlesque show down on Main Street the other night. It was great. This is the Blue Rose of Radio, Scott Ryan, and you're listening to KTPU 25.3 on your AM dial. So I want to give you a little traffic report. Got a strange call from a woman. Pulled over to a payphone and just screamed in my ear the whole time, screaming about some sort of dark figure crossing the street. Please, people, don't call in here. We have professionals to create the news. We would not just take news from someone on the street and then air it. You know, this is radio. This is important stuff here. So please, Don't call in. I'm sure the roads are fine. There are not figures out on the road. This next segment was when we took the show on the road to the Roadhouse in Washington State, and we talked about episode 12 of The Return with the Bookhouse boys. I heard that when they recorded this, it was very, very quiet, and there was no outside noise at all, because people are respectful when people are recording an interview. Take a listen.
Ben, we're at the Twin Peaks Festival, live upstairs in the Roadhouse.
This is part 12, called Let's Rock.
All right, so this is Brett. I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We had a lot of exposition and dialogue and information about the Blue Rose, which we have not had ever up until this point. That was like a huge download of information for us. I thought it was great. I have to watch it again because we were all buzzing so much with excitement and really pick apart what they were talking about. But that was amazing for me as a fan that's wanted that information for so long. Going into this season thinking, will they address the Blue Rose actually in dialogue? Is this just going to continue to be a, kind of a thematic metaphor? Or are we actually going to get something? And that was it. So that was gratifying for me.
This is Scott Ryan from the Blue Rose Magazine.
This is John Thorne from the Blue Rose Magazine.
And we're here today to talk about a very sad death in the Twin Peaks family, the death of John Thorne's dream theory that passed away at the ripe young age of 27.
The dream theory did not die tonight.
Oh, it's dead, my friend. Yes, I saw it.
You're going to give me a chance to respond?
I just wanted to say yes, sir, that it died.
If you go back and look at the text that I wrote, I never claimed that Chet Desmond was a figment of Cooper's imagination. Just he dreamed that sequence with Chet Desmond, that Chet Desmond, since he failed to solve the Teresa Banks murder, that maybe another agent could have done that. And whether Chet Desmond was real or an actual living being, either one was possible.
You know what's cute about this is when someone...
But you know what else? I'm going to tell you what else.
Yeah,
okay?
Yes, you tell me.
I've elaborated. The dream theory could very well be wrong, and I'd be happy to admit that it's wrong. But I think Lynch is toying with ideas that come from the Hindu religion, from the idea of quantum physics, and the idea that there's an interconnectivity between everyone. And... it's possible that what we learned tonight is that there's an interconnectivity between all of these agents that are part of this Blue Rose team. And it's real curious to me how Gordon Cole will look at Albert Rosenfield and almost communicate without words as if they are the sum of their parts.
Okay. That was really well put, but let's get back to the fact how the dream theory is dead, because for years you have said that Chet is an apparition of Cooper, that he is taking the place of him, not that he's a real person. We even had this argument in the Mark Frost
How did
thing.
it die?
Well, when they said that Chet worked on a Blue Rose case,
Yeah, okay.
which we saw. I mean,
Right.
we've now seen them, so
Right.
it's gone, buddy. And it was a great theory. I loved it. I miss it.
But
I'm
again,
gonna go to its
I'm
grave
waiting
and
to
put
hear why the theory's wrong.
When Mark Frost's book came up, and
Yeah.
you said this was
No.
sad when they mentioned his name, this was causing trouble, and now we know he works on the Blue Rose. So, and this is a Blue Rose task force, which made me happy.
You know, that was very interesting. I really liked
Because
that.
I loved it. I mean, because we're the Blue Rose Task Force, asking people to subscribe at BlueRoseMag.com and join the Blue Rose Task Force. That's what makes me happy. I don't want us to fight, John.
Hearing that Albert is the only...
That hasn't disappeared.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, confirming that Chet is still missing.
This is Chris. I just have to say that, whether you've been a fan of Dougie or not, that one moment was almost made the entire thing worth it. It was hilarious.
Yes.
That moment was the baseball, the game of catch between father and son, but there was no catching involved.
We all laughed at that part, and then it cut to the mountains, and everybody just died laughing again.
It was hilarious.
Yes.
And I also had to think, wow, this scene is just here so we can have starring Kyle MacLachlan at the end.
I've waited 25 years to see Audrey.
Yep.
I want to know what happened to her, and I was expecting a lot. And like, I will say, Sherilyn Fenn's performance was amazing.
Yes.
I mean, she gave it her all, but it was weird and it was convoluted.
It's very weird.
And it's not the way I would have wanted to reintroduce
I
Audrey.
agree.
And it's like, what is going on?
Very possible that this is some sort of delusion or mental issue going on. I mean, she didn't seem affected in how she was speaking and moving and acting, but I mean, that can really mess with your head when those kind of things happen.
Can I throw out one of my theories about Audrey tonight?
Yes, I want to hear your theory about Audrey.
So I say what we saw was Invitation to Love. I think Audrey was on Invitation to Love, and we just saw it. It's a show based. No. It was part of the episode. It's based on Twin Peaks. That's why she said Audrey, and that's why they said Roadhouse. But it was basically a soap.
Yes.
And everybody was cheating on everyone, and there were prenups. It was all the things that happened in Invitation to Love. It was just a newer version.
Spencer's theory about the Audrey scene, and again, I want to credit Spencer, is that scene was a play acting scene with Audrey and a potential therapist, that Audrey is in some sort of rehabilitation, that she's got a psychological issue, and that her therapist, that guy, was working through a scenario with her, humoring her, trying to guide her. There's a contract that's mentioned at some point, which doesn't seem to be a marriage contract, but something else. Again, when Spencer said that, it seemed to make that seem more important to me.
I think that's certainly an idea, and I actually don't seriously believe that it's Invitation to Love, but I think it's a cool idea because it was so soapy.
So my name's Ben. I'm Beano on Twitter, a.k.a. First of all, I've just been having the best time at the Twin Peaks Fest. This is my second festival, and it's just been incredible to be here in Twin Peaks and to be able to be in the Roadhouse and to watch an episode, a new episode of Twin Peaks was just a once in a lifetime experience. Maybe we'll get to do it again. I don't know, but I mean, when we started watching it, my eyes filled with tears. And to be surrounded with some of the coolest fans, it was just amazing, and the celebrities and everybody that's there. I've had the time of my life, and I love you, Ben and Brian. This is my favorite show. It's been awesome to see you guys here and to
You're
get
the
to know you
first
a little
one we
bit.
met?
That's right, at the car rental place
We were
at
renting
SeaTac.
a car, and he's like, I recognize your voices. Are you Ben and Brian? And we're like, we are. And we're renting a car, and it's midnight, but it was great because you were like, I will talk to you later.
Yes.
And then we just drove off. I don't want it to end.
I'm still processing. It's like, what? We went to the Palmer House, and we went to Renette's Bridge, and we went to, of course, the Double R Diner, and we hang out with all these celebrities, and it's...
I said, let's go to the fest. It's a one-time event. We'll go. I'm here going, it's like getting a tattoo. It's like, you just want more. I just want to come back again. Like.
We will be right back after these messages. And remember, kids, drink your Ovaltine. Ovaltine is fortified with vitamins and minerals to keep you working hard and playing hard the whole day long.
Christmas shopping has never been easier than it is this year at Horne's department store. From our men's and ladies' fashion departments to fine housewares to gifts for the kids, Horne's has everything you need to make this holiday season merry and bright.
Peruse our collection of crystal stemware, elegant china in all the most popular patterns, and don't forget our new line of one-of-a-kind bespoke teapots, imported directly from jolly old England. They make the perfect gift for the most discerning recipients on your gift list. Our selection of European fragrances is the best in the Northwest. Treat your lady friends the loveliest perfumes that make a real statement, whether she prefers forested or fruity scents.
Stop in and visit our Christmas tree lot, where you'll find only the best firs and pines for your home and hearth. Every tree is $5, and all proceeds go to the Door at Home for Boys. You'll find everything you need to decorate in our decor department, the most shimmering tinsel, the brightest lights, and a wide selection of tree toppers, from stars to angels.
And don't forget, this week only, we're offering free gift wrapping on all purchases over $10.
We're also extending our store hours to 9 p.m. It's the perfect solution for you last-minute shoppers.
For the things you need, the things you want, and everything in between, visit Horne's Department Store
on the corner of Maple and Snow in downtown Twin Peaks.
Hi, I'm Harley Payton, and you're listening to Twin Peaks Unwrapped.
White Sands Radio.
So we're on the phone with Sherilyn Fenn, who played Audrey in Twin Peaks.
Second episode where I had to dance. Well, that very day, David said, okay, Sherilyn Fenn, Laura, we're rewriting this scene. Get a cappuccino.
Wow.
He rewrites the scene. I'm panicked. Oh, my God. I already worked with Roy. David's rewriting the scene. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
I call Roy. Roy says, Sherilyn, it's David. Don't worry about it. Just do what he says. I'm like, oh, okay.
And it's funny, that's like one of the most memorable scenes is you dancing.
I know. And I was frightened. I'm like, what do you mean I have to dance? I don't want to dance. What am I supposed to? So we wrote you a song, and you're just going to put it on, and you just groove. I'm like, oh, my God. I think if you look closely enough, my hands are shaking. I was really, I felt silly.
Yeah.
I mean, I did.
It was so good, though.
Like, look at me dance. No, that would have been really ugly.
It's so interesting you say that about dancing, and you go all the way to the end of season 2, and you don't even want to be part of the pageant. You're like, I'm going to make a speech. I'm a businesswoman now. And your character, your character evolved in a matter of months, according to the show.
It had to do with me.
From the bottom of my heart, I don't want to be the town bathing beauty.
Roy and I talked about that. He said, if you're going to be in a parade, you might as well lead it.
Yeah.
They're doing what they're trying to do what you're doing, so we're moving in a different direction. Stopped wearing sweaters. I got sporties, like business little jackets, and started just moving in a different direction because they were trying to, it was crazy, and we had lost David the second season. I mean, he wasn't there. David doesn't do things to be weird for the sake of being weird.
Right.
Yeah.
That would, again, be like playing sexy instead of just, you're a person. It's sexy when somebody's authentic and they're just like emotional and trying to find their way. That is where Roy really had a hand, where he said, let's move in this direction.
Yeah.
She wants to become a special agent. She's going to show him.
Right.
And now that she has this love to fill the hole that her father never gave her the love, she had purpose. All of a sudden, she had a purpose. And she saw the way it was never explored. I wish it had been more, her little brother Johnny, and the way he was treated and why he was that way. And Kyle and I were friends. We didn't have what I would call chemistry. But when Special Agent Dale Cooper and Audrey Horne came together, something happened. Okay? It just did.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, David said, are you in love with, Kyle? I'm like, my God, no. I said, no, not even a little, and not even, no, at all. I said, but Audrey thinks, he's the bee's knees. What do you want me to say? Something happened, and it was a great thing, and life goes on.
Yeah. You mentioned clothing earlier. I guess you wore some of your own clothing on the show?
All the time, yeah.
Oh, wow. That's really cool.
I would have been in really big sweaters, big, huge sweaters like the girls in the first episode.
Yeah.
They had a big one. I'm like, I ran and grabbed my baby pink cashmere antique sweater, which David ruined, by the way. Because when they put me against the wall with the Norwegians, she kept saying, tighter, tighter, tighter. And they like pinned it and wrapped it into a ball behind my back and totally stretched it out. But it was worth it. Yeah, a lot of the sweaters, the lace top sweater. I mean, a bunch of them were mine. I was just starting to bring in my own stuff.
I didn't know that you could even do that. I didn't know you could just say, I'm going to bring my own clothing.
You were the best dressed on the show, definitely.
Well, normally you couldn't, but see, Audrey was barely in it. In the pilot, I don't think anybody knew that was going to happen at all. At all. So they're like, oh, we don't care if she wears a pink sweater. It doesn't,
Right.
Yeah.
It just didn't matter. And then all of a sudden, it really mattered.
Yeah.
Thank God.
How do you think the fans are going to react to Twin Peaks 2017 without spoiling anything?
No spoilers.
What is your gut feeling about?
In a couple words.
Yeah, without spoilers, without getting you in trouble.
What I like, the world doesn't. You know what I mean? I don't really know. And also, David didn't hand out scripts to all of us.
Wow.
So I know what I do in it.
Yeah.
And that's all I know.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
I personally feel, though I kind of feel my way through life, what David ended up writing for me was amazing. It was wonderful.
Oh,
I
that's
was
awesome.
so excited and challenged and nervous and thrilled, and that's, you know, and we had a great time doing it, and we just, you know, it was a bumpy ride getting there, but once we got there, we just and hugged, and he's like, "It's great, be happy," you know, and he said that he loved doing it so much. He said if people like the show, that he would do more.
Oh, that would
Now,
be something.
David can change his mind, as we know, you know.
Yeah.
But he said the hardest part is writing it. It's just really buckling down and getting it written. He said, but, you know, Sherilyn, you know, he's like, you never know, and that's the truth. He's
Yeah,
right. You don't
never know.
Yeah.
Right.
You have no, it's a throw of a dice. They could love it, they could hate it. But he loved doing it so much. He said, if they love it, I would do more. And
That's
I'm like,
something.
that's
Oh,
great.
That's awesome.
That was the real Audrey Horne, Sherilyn Fenn, we had in the studio some time ago right here on White Sands' premier Twin Peaks radio show. And I am your host, the Blue Rose of Radio, Scott Ryan. Time's about 5 a.m. and I could use a refill on my coffee. I haven't seen my secretary for a while. I'm sure nothing bad has happened to her. She was out filing some papers by her filing cabinet, and, you know, I'm sure she just maybe alphabetizing things, and I think everything's fine. I have a letter here that wants to hear my prayer. That's all anyone ever hears. I can't quite read the name. It's like from Fred Blug or Frog Bug or Fred Frog. So I don't know who wrote this letter, but they really want to hear my prayer. I tell you, we'll get to it. We just have a lot of guests today on the show. Now, we have a very special guest, a Joshua Minton from something called the Red Room Podcast. Not sure what a podcast is. I'm going to guess that he broke his arm and they're putting the cast in some sort of a pod that goes around the arm to fix it. Can't say, I'd never heard of such a thing, but I guess I'm interested to find out about something called a skeleton key of Season 3 of Twin Peaks. Here is Josh Minton.
And so you've been doing this skeleton key. Can you tell us how this came about and maybe explain for people who don't know what a skeleton key is?
Yeah, well, so first of all, it explains absolutely nothing. You're not going to come here and find out any of the mysteries. Look, I'm not John Thorne. I'm not Scott. I don't look at it as critically probably as most people do. You guys included with that, Dave Bushman for sure. But, you know, what I do very well in my own professional life is business analysis. So I take complex data sets and I make them simple so that, you know, even a CEO could understand it, which, you know, it's a small skill set, right? So when I got to episode or part 3 of this return, and that was the episode with the Purple Lodge or whatever we're calling it, right? I thought, boy, I wish I had a cockpit with which I could see where Mark Frost's narrative is being deconstructed and then reconstructed by Lynch as he, you know, builds these scene sets for us. So I set out to create exactly that, a tool for myself to try and understand what exactly was going on in this show.
Yeah.
So we can start from there. And so if you will, and it's very hard to describe this thing with words when you don't have it on the screen, but I'll do my best. If we could just take a black rectangle in your mind and imagine that you had a mixing board. Okay, and picture David Lynch and Mark Frost standing over this mixing board, and you know, I'm thoroughly convinced that Mark Frost wrote a linear script to this show, and then handed it, you know, to David Lynch and said, "Do what you're going to do. The only caveat is I have the final word because I've already published a book that takes place after this show, and there's going to be another one that comes after that because you need 2 last words when it comes to David Lynch, right?" So I love this story already, right? And the idea that Lynch is going to take it, maybe throw out 20% of the script. I don't know, you just got to allow for that when it comes to David Lynch. He's going to second guess himself and change as he's actually filming things. So, with that in mind, we've got a completely deconstructed linear script that's essentially been Pulp Fiction, right? I think that's a consensus in the community now, is that we've got multiple timelines, fractured scenes, loops that are going on within the same scene, just crazy things going on. Definitely. So how can we possibly put our arms around this thing? Well, my approach was to go part by part and break it down in terms of narrative, right? So, my history and training comes from a writing school. So I deeply appreciate Mark Frost's ability to kind of rein in David Lynch when it comes to story. And I do think we're telling a very, very rich story right here that's multifaceted. I mean, if I had to put a literary reference to it, I would say the closest thing is probably James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake. Wow. It really is a work of art on a scale that's never been shown on television before. And the vitriol in some of the community is testament to that, right? So the idea of just breaking it down by narrative. So if we just take the first part, if we can all remember back to that first part, remember the first scene was Cooper sitting with the firemen, or the giant as we knew him then. They're listening to that old style phonograph, right?
Yeah.
And that was scene one. It kicked off. So that's a narrative. Cooper, in my mind, I'm like, Cooper escapes. That's a narrative. And it turns out that as of the airing of part 13, we've now seen 3 hours, 20 minutes, and 42 seconds of that story of Cooper escaping.
Yeah.
So just consider that. That's amazing. That's like, a Fire Walk with Me and a half that we've seen of Cooper coming back from the Red Room. So, we didn't even see the main storyline of that part one until about 32 minutes into the episode, which was the woman dying in Buckhorn and all of the things that happened. I mean, that was 21 minutes and 12 seconds out of that entire episode. But yeah, we didn't even see it until halfway through. So just juxtaposing those two things, you can see how David Lynch has completely obfuscated what the main storylines are in the show. And if you didn't have a tool like this, you would be almost lost at sea, like tossed around the ocean, just hoping that these images would coalesce into some type of meaning. Well, I don't like to do that. So I like to apply as much analysis as we can. Look, I'm not trying to figure out what's going on. I'm certainly not saying that this is an authority on what the mysteries are or what even the secrets are in the show. But I do believe that we can, as a community, agree that this is the story being told in this scene. And then we can look at it over time to see how it changes and evolves and sometimes merges and gets dropped.
We will be right back after these messages.
In a world of Twin Peaks podcasts, only one show is going where no podcast has gone before.
Welcome to Dear Meadow Radio, the movie.
You were expecting someone else? With more thrills.
This one's coming from J. Edgar.
More chills.
The downer you are!
And more spills.
Yeah, all the audio. No, it's not that the file is lost. It's that the file was never even saved.
And celebrity guest stars.
Is that kind of how the book was produced?
Hey Mark, I got one piece of advice for you. You gotta get a life, buddy. You gotta get a life.
Dear Meadow Radio, the movie. Coming someday.
Hi, I'm Sherilyn Fenn, and you're listening to Twin Peaks Unwrapped.
White Sands Radio.
Producer and writer Bob Angles, who co-wrote Firewalk with me.
I was working on the show. That really was my first TV experience. I don't know, David and I got along great. As Dave would say, Ike and Mike. He asked me if I'd like to write a script with him, but it wasn't Twin Peaks. I think we started In Heaven or Dream of the Bovine. I'm not sure which one we started. And we'd work at David's house. One day, I think he came from a meeting with CB 2000 or whatever that company's name was, Monsieur Bouygues, and he said, we're going to write a Twin Peaks movie.
Cool.
And we just started.
Wow.
So we just jumped in, and it sort of turned into what it is. It's a, prequel and sequel. That's kind of the idea, that it would cover everything.
Totally.
Before and after, which kind of does.
Yeah, it does.
But I think he didn't feel like he was done with the series, is my guess, looking back on it. And so we just, he came in, we'd sit in the living room, and he came in and said, let's go. So we started. We sort of went where we went. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We'd have an idea of something. It wasn't so much that we were dealing with a specific issue as that we just thought there's lots of loose ends to wind up. It's really a case of things just evolving. We say, let's start here, let's get that. You get all the regulars in. Everybody has a scene. And in the first couple of drafts, everybody was in it. And I think when David shot it, everybody had a scene. And then we cut lots of stuff out, or David did.
Right.
The first draft was huge. The very first draft was ginormous.
I bet.
My guess is that first draft was probably 180 pages, something like that.
And I think the first cut of the film was like 5 hours. So it's like you could have had like 2 films with all the material you guys had.
Yeah. And I think David at one point wanted to do an intermission, and then whoever was, I think it was Bob Rainey, who was the money guy behind this part of it in America, said, no, we're not, you can't do that because we got to be able to show this movie, 5 times in a day or whatever it is.
Did you read Jennifer Lynch's Secret Diary of Laura Palmer preparing to write the script?
No.
Wow. I'm actually impressed because there's definitely things in there that feel like it's from the diary.
We all knew what was going to be in the diary. But no, it all comes from David. It's all the same source. Yeah, but they kind of match up, don't they, I guess?
Cooper originally in the first draft, he was supposed to solve the Teresa Banks case, or he was investigating it, and then it got switched over to Chris Isaak. And I'm sure you get this asked all the time, but I thought I'd approach it as if Kyle MacLachlan had decided not to do the movie at all, do you think Chris Isaak would have taken on more of the Cooper role of talking to Albert and Cole and being in Laura's dream and saying, don't take the ring? Could you have seen Chris Isaak having a bigger role in the film?
Oh, yeah. Kyle didn't want to do the movie, as I recall. And we said, well, then Chris Isaak will. It's pretty simple.
Right.
And somewhere in the course of getting everything ready to go, Kyle reconsidered. So that made a change, which was kind of cool. But that was completely showbiz.
I had heard an interview, and I don't know if you can clarify it more, but you had mentioned about David Bowie's Agent Jeffries, and his purpose, part of his purpose as creating this character was to kind of help Kyle Cooper get back into the film as a transition. Can you talk any more about that?
I think that was part of it. It was a way to get him back in the movie. I don't recall anything other than that David's assistant, Debbie Trutnick, would always come in when we were writing. She'd always come in and joke about what part David Bowie was going to have in the movie. so then we had a part for him.
That's pretty good, though. It's a good part.
Yeah, he was great. He's a very nice guy. I don't know how we landed on that scene, and like I said, it was really that Kyle wasn't going to do it, and then he decided to do it. But that kind of helped. That kind of makes it cool.
The Angels were never in the first or second draft of the screenplay. I wondered if you could tell us about how they got added to the film.
We talked a lot about redemption of Laura. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's where the Angels came from, is that idea to lift her up, literally.
So your wife had a part. She did several things in the original series, and she did stuff in the film.
She's the waitress in The Great Northern.
Trudy, I believe, yeah.
Yeah, she's Trudy, yeah. And I would always write, when I do a script, I would always write a scene in The Great Northern. It was kind of an inside joke for everybody. I'd say, they'll meet at the Great Northern, and she's a wonderful actress, but, she does musical comedy. But it was...
Recently, reading the new issue of Blue Rose magazine where you talked to Scott Ryan, and you mentioned that she was the one that came up with Let's Rock on the windshield.
Yes.
I think that was brilliant.
She would always say Corstel all the time.
Wow.
When we were doing that. It's her idea.
That's so brilliant to actually go back to a few words that the little man from another place said in a dream, and she remembered that and actually decided to incorporate that. And, of course, we as the viewer are the only ones that really know that supernatural meaning. But, yeah, you'll have to tell her how incredible that it was that she added that.
I will.
Yeah.
She'd also, Michael Anderson, the guy who played
little man from another place.
Guy. Most of the time when you see him on screen, my wife Jill is somewhere just off camera feeding him the backwards lines.
Oh, wow.
A lot of the stuff where he's like looking up, he's actually listening to Jill.
And that was Bob Engels, co-writer of Fire Walk With Me. You have just heard on KTPU, White Sands Radio. Yeah. I don't mean to be distracted. I just felt like I smelled some burning ash of some sort in here. I hope everything's fine, but this is radio and we have to go on and have no problems. And yes, the phones are lit up begging me for my prayer. I'm gonna play it. I'm looking for it, alright? We're gonna hear it. But until then, let's talk with John Carroll Lynch, who directed Harry Dean Stanton in the film Lucky.
What's the matter, Howard?
President Roosevelt escaped.
What are you talking about? Presidents. Which one? Roosevelt. Yeah, which one?
No, my tortoise. President Roosevelt. He escaped.
How does a 100-year-old tortoise escape?
I left the gate open when I went to check the mail.
Where's your mailbox? Europe?
I saw him eyeing that gate the other day. He had to have timed it out perfectly. I searched our entire neighborhood.
Did you search your entire yard? Hey, we're talking about his best friend here.
Thank you, Lucky.
You're welcome, Howard.
How did David Lynch get involved in this project?
He was recommended by, you won't be surprised, by Harry himself, who was going to play Howard. And he came up with David's name, and we all agreed that was a great idea. Found out if he could do it, and he was in the midst of post-production of Twin Peaks, but his love for Harry really, paid off for us because he was willing to find the time we needed in a very busy time for him to act in the film, and he came so prepared and so ready to play Howard. He was very respectful and just basically treated it as any actor I think you would imagine he would want to have on a set.
Yeah.
Was it kind of surreal to be directing David Lynch? Did you have a moment of, this is kind of weird?
I didn't ever have like an out of body kind of how am I doing moment. It came late in the schedule. So in some ways I was more comfortable with the role I was taking on as being a director. And David was so open to direction and so respectful that it didn't ever feel uncomfortable. He just treated it as an actor, and I treated it as a director. And if he did have any problems with what I was doing on the set, he didn't mention it on the day. I also think that he had his hands full as an actor. He had a lot of material in a short period of time. So. Yeah. He was focused on that. And I'll tell you, there were many times in the process where in those 2 days, we really needed him to be rock solid, and he was.
Don't want to ruin a thing, but he has a little speech, and it was very powerful. David Lynch,
and funny at the same time. It was funny to have something that was very meaningful, but also have some comical to it. Yeah,
positively Lynchian, really.
Yes.
Really was.
The humor inside this very moving thing. Speech was written so beautifully, and he was really excited to say it. I mean, he called up Logan after he said yes, and he said, I just love that speech. I love that about the tortoise. It's great. It really feels good to be able to have an opportunity on that.
The friendship between Harry's character and Lynch's character came very natural. I mean, you could feel that chemistry and that friendship.
Came right off the screen.
It really did.
Yeah.
I just loved it. And even the whole bars.
Well, because they know each other. They know each other so well as people. it was a great shorthand. I've had the opportunity to play with friends and to play friendships with close friends on film and on stage, and there's nothing like having that shorthand in those years between people. It's very difficult to establish that so quickly with people that you don't know. So it was a big leg up, the warmth that David and Harry have for each other, and how that had exhibited itself when they were acting those two parts.
Done in 18 days, is that right? It was like 18 days you filmed this?
That's correct. 18 days. 18 days.
Yeah, 18 days. So, was there any memories that you could share with us?
Well, a great David memory was when we were working on there's a fight, an argument at the bar that David participates in, and Harry was having difficulty getting to these run of lines that he turns the argument on to Elaine, who's played by Beth Grant. And he was really struggling getting there. He would get to that point, and it would just fall off the table. He just could not remember that beat. He was so frustrated because, why am I even saying this? And I explained what I thought the reason why, and he did what I've done 1,000 times, which is turn to my fellow actor, in this case with David, for leverage against the director. And he turned to David and he goes, David, do you understand why I'm doing this? And he said, yes, I do, Harry, I understand. And he goes, well, why? And David turned to me, and I waited for a minute, and I said, no, go ahead. And I said, go ahead, say whatever you want to say. And he turned to Harry and said, it's not my place to say, Harry.
Wow.
It was just like, I'm going to let you direct this.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And I really appreciated that.
That is really cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
Wow.
It's a really special picture. It is a movie that features Harry Dean Stanton in an exquisite performance.
We will be right back after these messages.
Hello, friends. This is Francis Albert, and it's Christmas time again. If you find yourself in Las Vegas this holiday season, make sure to stop into the Silver Mustang Casino and Lounge, where you'll find all the games of chance and skill to keep you warm during those cold desert nights. And you never know, Mrs. Jackpots is always looking for her man. So stop into the Silver Mustang Casino and Lounge. You won't regret it, baby. Oh, the weather outside is frightful, but the fire is so delightful. There's only one place to go, Silver Mustang Lounge and Casino, doobie-doobie-doo.
He's your favorite father from next door, who's light on his feet and has a voice that is out of this world.
Leland Palmer is back and ready to sing all his favorite hits.
Back and ready.
And enjoy his frantic rendition of Maresy Dotes.
Oh, Maresy Dotes and Nosy Dotes and little lambsy divey, a kiddly divey too, wouldn't you?
You think you've heard Leland Palmer, but you haven't heard him like this.
With his exclusive track featuring longtime friend Ben Horn.
Getting to know you, getting to feel free and easy.
Available on 2 EPs while supplies last on B.O.B. Records.
Leland Palmer is now booking for birthday parties, bar mitzvahs, and holiday parties.
To order with COD or credit card, please call toll-free 1-800-LELAND-PALMER. That's 1-800-572-5637. And to save on shipping and handling charges, send $19.95 to P.O. Box 262, Pearl Lakes.
Get happy!
Sing hallelujah, come on, get happy. Sing hallelujah, come on, get happy. Get ready for the judgment day. Sing hallelujah, come on, get happy. Get ready for the judgment.
Hi, I'm Kimmy Robertson, and you're listening to Twin Peaks Unwrapped.
White Sands Radio.
So we are on the phone with Sabrina Sutherland, executive producer of Twin Peaks: The Return. Hi, Sabrina.
Hello. Nice to be here.
So when did you actually meet David Lynch, and when did you get maybe your relationship grow to the point that you were a lot closer?
Well, I mean, I met him on the second season, but, you know, and I met him, obviously worked with him on these other shows. But I was just in kind of a different capacity. I think maybe Lost Highway, interacting with him a little bit more just because I'd be on set and I was then production supervisor. So I went up from production coordinator to production supervisor. I was doing a little bit more work on the show and having to deal with him a little bit more. And I'd be the person he'd have to, you know, if he wanted a crane or something like that, something that's outside of the norm, I was the person because I was controlling the budget and everything, and so he would say, "Hey, can we get a techno crane today? Can we work that in?" And that would be me.
Neat. That is really something.
Yeah.
And you were involved with Twin Peaks: The Missing Pieces. Can you tell us a little bit about what your involvement with that was?
Sure. So in order to do The Missing Pieces, myself, I guess, and a couple other people, we went to the storage where all the film was and went through all the boxes to figure out what was in the boxes. So I kind of created a budget to see if it was feasible to do this and, what it would cost, and then find out what exactly there was. And, of course, Noriko went through and was able to catalog all of the film that was there. David went through to see everything and see what was left and what could actually be used, what was considered something that wasn't already used. Because Noriko hadn't worked on the original either on Fire Walk With Me.
Yeah.
And Dean went through all the sound to see what was there. Let's see, just kind of overseeing the editorial process of getting all of that stuff together and working with MK2, who has the film, and getting it to CBS. These scenes are the scenes that are there. There's nothing that's missing. It is the complete film, and whatever is not included in there was not shot.
Wow.
So these really are all of the missing scenes. There's nothing there. And we weren't sure. People were thinking maybe it would be 30 minutes, but to be an hour and a half, that's really great.
Yeah, it's like almost like another movie, really.
Yeah.
So.
And the way David put it together was just so brilliant, I thought. It was like its own film in its own way.
Definitely.
It's pretty neat.
And so now here we are with the new series. Am I right? It was like 4 or 5 years ago that you got involved with the return of Twin Peaks?
I got involved towards the end of 2012, I think.
Wow.
Where I started doing stuff, but David and Mark had been working prior to that and writing. Yeah, so I came in and David explained to me exactly what they were thinking, what they had written down, and then kind of what they were hoping to do. And I had to create a budget and a schedule based on that of what kind of like a projection of what it possibly could be, so that people would say, okay, whether or not they would want to support something like that. There was not only a lot of work, but I should say, too, with post, again, we were doing it like a feature film, so, we couldn't start on the process of music or mixing until David edited everything, until everything was done being edited. You just didn't know where everything was going to be, so you don't want to do it twice.
Yeah,
that's true.
So, he went through all of that before then he would go in, get all the music, do the mixing, and then because we just didn't have enough time to do everything, we were color timing at night.
Wow.
So David would be, we'd be working during the day, and then David and I would go to the post facility at night to do the color correction. And that, again, was being done as one big thing. We weren't starting to make tapes to be sent to Showtime until everything was done. Then once everything was done, we started making everything. You have Dwayne Dunham, who was the main editor, and some of the other editors who were working with him were assembling. As footage came in, they'd assemble it while we were shooting.
Oh.
So they had an initial kind of outline based on the script for David when he got to the editing process. And then David started working with Dwayne, and that went on for a while. And then the editorial department, Dwayne left, and the editors left, and then David went back through and was editing.
Wow.
He continued and going through different things, and then we were finally done with editing.
Wow.
But everything was looked at by David.
And when you say David, was he actually sitting at the computer and like cutting and doing?
Yes.
Wow, that is impressive. I mean, I knew he kind of did that back in the day of DavidLynch.com when he had his own projects, but it's impressive to see a big project like this that he kind of took over, and that is really something.
No, he did. Like I said, he worked harder on this than anybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely
else.
shows.
He, 100%. He was involved with everything, and everything again had to go through him.
He came up with his own lipstick. Like there was not the right shade of lipstick for somebody. I think that's what it was. Maybe it was for Diane.
But that was Laura Dern. So Laura came up with all kinds of ideas, and she and David together created the whole Diane look.
Wow.
You know, all the clothing, her wigs, her makeup, everything. And the two of them figured out exactly what that look would be. And I think that's such an incredible collaboration.
Yeah.
Her character looks stunning.
And you got to be floor attendant Jackie in the casino there. How was that for you? How was that being an actor? I mean, all this time you've been behind the camera and now you're in front of the camera.
Oh, it was fun. It was so much fun. I mean, you know, people are so supportive, so it was good. David was, I don't know, testing me maybe, or just not sure, but he would throw things, change dialogue, things like that.
Oh, really?
Right before, yeah. So for me, not being an actor, it was kind of, you know, hair-raising, because I was like, oh no, can't even remember what I'm supposed to say. Now you're giving me something else to say. So, but it was all fun. It was really great. And the very first take, Kyle was Dougie, and I know Kyle. And when we're in the scene, I come up to him and talk to him, and he turned and he spoke his line. And I think the first take, I just kind of stepped backwards because he was something I didn't recognize at all. He was so in that character. He's so good. He's so versatile and just really amazing in all the characters that he does in Twin Peaks. I mean, I really think he did a stellar performance. But when he hit me with that Dougie, I didn't know what to say. I kind of stuttered. And so then in the scene, I'm supposed to follow him down this corridor kind of and turn around a corner, and we're out of the shot. And so then Kyle looks at me and goes, oh, that's the first time you met Dougie, huh?
That's
totally.
Awesome.
In the AMA, you mentioned you were still working on Twin Peaks: The Return.
Well, first let me just qualify one thing. So you guys know, and it's just, I guess, because of the way it's been promoted through Showtime, but the show is just Twin Peaks, and The Return is something that Showtime put on so that it could be distinguished in, like, the TV guide or whatever, that it wasn't the original series, that it was the new series.
Yeah.
But so you know, it's just Twin Peaks.
If we got to ever see the script, which we all would love to see, would it, on the script, would it just say Twin Peaks?
Yeah, I think it just says, let me see, I have a script right here. Let me look. You know, to be honest, it doesn't even have a cover page.
Wow.
That's secretive.
That is something.
Yeah.
So there is no cover page, but it is just Twin Peaks.
I think about that whole sweeping in the roadhouse, and I imagine that wasn't in the script. I just imagined that, like, someone maybe was actually sweeping, and David was like, okay, let's just keep it going. And can you share with that? Was that a scene that was just he was inspired to do? Did he have a lot of happy accidents?
That was something that he came up with. That it wasn't scripted, but it wasn't somebody was sweeping. And Willie, who was doing the sweeping, worked on our crew. A wonderful guy. I think David asked him if, I think he had it, it wasn't that David saw him. David had it in his head, his mind's eye of what he wanted to see. And he asked, hey, Willie, will you go over there and sweep? And so Willie went over and swept.
Yeah.
And just said, you know, just keep sweeping.
It was because of you, because of your hard work every day that we got this product. I know Lynch and I know Frost and so many other people were part of this, but it was also what you were doing every day that made this happen. So I want to say thank you so much for that.
Oh, well, thank you for saying that, and you're welcome. And thank you guys for being the fans that you are. I know that the show wouldn't be here now if it wasn't for the fans. I know that.
Yeah.
So we're all so grateful for the fans. So thank you guys.
And that was one of the nicest people in the world, executive producer of Twin Peaks, Sabrina Sutherland, here on our radio program. And it is 5:30 in the... Sir, you can't be back in here. Whew! I mean, take a shower, dude. You've got some... Yeah, that's a real nice... I'm so glad you're doing your beatnik poetry here. This is not a poetry reading, sir. That's very interesting. And I'm not thirsty, but I appreciate...
The horse is the white of the eyes and dark within.
Oh, we're still going with the poem. This is great. A head massage. I'm not really in the need for... Hey, man, clip those things, will you? Take some fingernail clippers to the... Hey. And still, with the poem? This is how I go out? Come on. Hey, come on. Buddy, please, just hold on. I gotta say one thing. Can I please just say one thing to my listeners? This is important. Hiya. Listen, thank you. I just want to say, if you're a Twin Peaks fan, make sure you go out and subscribe to the new subscription of the Blue Rose magazine at bluerosemag.com. We have the 2018 subscription for issues 5, 6, 7, 8 available now. It's the Log Lady subscription, and you can go out. This is the water. I get it. bluerosemag.com.
White Sands Radio.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, guys. How are you?
Oh, great. You know, you had mentioned to us in the past how books are kind of like gifts that you leave by the side of the road. This book really is a gift. I love it. I know so many fans love it. You answered so many questions that we've had for over 25 years. Thank you so much for this book.
Well, you're welcome. I'm glad you saw it that way. I felt we'd left a lot of things unanswered and things that we didn't have time to address in the return, and this was a way I thought to bridge that gap.
What did you most enjoy about writing the final dossier?
I think it was the chance to kind of close the book on a lot of the characters that we'd not had a chance to catch up with, and put to rest some lingering questions about certain characters that I think had haunted viewers for a long time.
Yes, definitely. And so I wondered, how did this book come about? You know, we had the secret history of Twin Peaks, and did you know right away, hey, I'm going to do a second book? Or how did this kind of fit in when you first started thinking about writing a book?
Well, my thinking evolved after we'd written the scripts and before we got into production. I knew I wanted to write at least one book, but then I realized I wanted to write two. I wanted to go back in time and weave a kind of in-depth mythological history for the region and the people, and fold Twin Peaks into a larger American context. So that became the secret history. And then I felt I wanted to more specifically, as I just described, bring you up to date on the people that were in danger of kind of being left behind or forgotten.
With an epistolary book, can you ever really trust the author? Can we really trust Tamron Preston for what she has to say?
Well, you might be able to trust her a little bit more. This isn't technically epistolary in the way that the first book was. This is an FBI agent's case files.
True.
So her version of things may be inherently more dedicated to rigorous fact-finding.
Yeah.
I wanted to apply that standard to her investigation into these various people.
The secret history of Twin Peaks can kind of stand on its own, but I like how you kind of weaved in this agent.
Yeah, and I think also that the two books act as companion pieces and maybe sort of bookends for the series. I think it's a fun way to look at the Twin Peaks experience through different media.
Definitely. After finishing the book, I texted Ben right afterwards saying, that is the cherry on the cake. You know, that is the frosting on the cake. It was just so good.
So good.
And I was like, Mark Frost is the heart and soul of Twin Peaks.
I did the analogy of this coming as sort of the dessert course to the end of a long and multi-layered meal felt pretty apt.
Can you share with us the origins of how the new series came about?
Started with my calling David and saying, yeah, I think I might have a way to get back to Twin Peaks. And we had a lunch in August of 2012 at Musso and Frank's. And enough came out of the conversation to pick up the thread and start following it. We started talking on a regular basis, and 9 months to a year, I think, before we actually started writing anything. But it was a lot of really fruitful discussion and laying the groundwork for what was to come, and that's how it all began.
And I think I heard you guys hadn't even thought about 25 years later, which I think all us fans keep thinking, oh, we're getting close to 25 years, the show should come back, but you guys didn't even think about that? Is that right?
My recollection is that one of the things we did first after deciding to pick it up was actually watch the final episode together.
Huh.
And, you know, there's that moment where she turns to Cooper in the Red Room and says that line. And, you know, that was certainly the moment when the spark plug ignited.
Isn't that something?
That's cool.
That's really cool. Was that the first time that you guys actually had sat down together to watch that last episode?
Yes.
Isn't that something? Isn't that
Wow.
That is really something. You were recently at the Austin Film Festival. I think you shared something about the character Rodney's cut.
Rod Mitchum. It's a very simple story. He'd been injured, slightly injured during an on-set accident. A light had fell over and hit him just below his eye, actually more on the cheekbone. They'd already shot some scenes with him, so David devised this way of figuring out why there would be a Band-Aid or a scar or, the trace of him getting that injury. And I thought that he came up with a hilarious way of doing it.
I'd heard that your dad actually shot his scenes before, through Skype before and maybe during pre-production. Is that right?
That's correct. I was back east visiting him. It was a little more than a month, maybe, or just about a month before we actually started production. And we actually shot it on Skype with David in L.A. and my dad in upstate New York. And I was there, and my brother Scott was there, and my son Travis. So we actually had all three generations together. Travis was the production assistant, and Scott was helping with the lighting, and it was kind of fun.
What a great moment that you guys had, but also for, us fans just to be able to see Doc Hayward again. That was really a great scene.
Very special.
Yeah, I felt really good about that scene and spent a lot of time getting it right.
There's talk that you'd be open to another season, possibly, of Twin Peaks?
Well, no, what I said was that I'm considering it.
Okay.
And that's what you would normally do. I haven't spoken to anybody about it, but, I'm mulling it over.
And that also goes for any chance of another Twin Peaks novel. These last two have been great. We really enjoyed them. We'd love to have more.
Yeah, I guess that would fall under the same category. We'll have to see where things go from here.
Of course. Well, we hope this isn't the end, but if this was the end of Twin Peaks, this is a very satisfying ending. And thank you, Mark.
You're very welcome, guys, and great to talk with you again. Thanks to you and all the people in the Twin Peaks community for hanging in there for so long, and hope it's been a good ride.
White Sands Radio.
When the twilight is gone and no songbirds are singing, when the twilight is gone, you come into my heart, and here in my heart you will stay while I pray. My prayer is to linger with you at the end of the day, in a dream that's divine. My prayer is a rapture in blue, with the world far away and your lips.
This is the water, and this is the well. Drink full and ascend. This is the water, and this is the well. Drink full and ascend.
Thank you, Scott Ryan, for hosting today's show, and everyone who has joined us over this past year. I'm Jubel Brosseau from Counter Esperanto Podcast. You can find us on iTunes or whichever your favorite podcatcher app might be. And you can follow us on Twitter at C_Esperanto.